Linda's announcement hit me like a slap across the room, and I swear the air changed when everyone started clapping for Evan, her 24-year-old son who'd been here barely long enough to find the break room. I kept my smile still, my hand steady, because shock has a way of sharpening everything, especially the truth you've tried to ignore. What none of them realized in that moment was this: they had just pushed the one person holding their entire operation together. And once I walked away, nothing would run the same again. If you've ever been overlooked for someone unqualified, leave a comment and subscribe to hear more stories like this. When people talk about loyalty at work, they usually mean showing up on time, hitting deadlines, keeping things moving. But for me, loyalty became something heavier, something stitched into my everyday life without me even realizing it. After my divorce, Redwood Equipment Logistics felt like the one stable thing left, a place where I could rebuild myself quietly, piece by piece, without anyone asking too many questions. The Pacific Northwest had a way of softening hard edges. Gray mornings, clean air, the hum of trucks rolling out before sunrise. My daughter Ava was 16 then, old enough to see that her mother was exhausted but too kind to say it out loud. She'd stay over every other weekend, sitting at the kitchen counter doing homework while I caught up on route adjustments or supplier reports, pretending it was no big deal. Sometimes she'd slide my laptop shut with one finger and say, "Mom, you need a break." And maybe she was right, but breaks didn't pay for braces or school trips or the mortgage my ex had walked away from. So I worked and worked. 7 years of missed barbecues, canceled dinners, and late-night emergencies shaped me into the woman everyone at Redwood relied on. Routing failures, weather-related shutdowns, catastrophic supplier delays. My phone was the one that rang. I didn't complain. I took pride in being the one who could fix it when no one else could. People said I was calm under pressure, but really I just didn't have the luxury of falling apart. The promotion Linda hinted at kept me going. Director of Regional Operations. It wasn't just a title, it was proof that everything I'd done meant something. Linda had smiled that thin professional smile and said, "You're next in line, Tessa. Keep doing what you're doing." And I believed her, or maybe I needed to. The truth is, I'd built half the systems Evan would later pretend to understand. I'd mapped every distribution corridor between Tacoma and Spokane, renegotiated contracts that saved the company millions, and redesigned our emergency response model after the Cascadia storms nearly shut us down. People joked that if I ever left, Redwood would fall apart within a week. I'd laugh, but a part of me wondered if it was actually true. Linda relied on me more than she admitted. When a driver shortage hit, she called me at 9 p.m. asking for projections. When a supplier in Bend missed a shipment, she wanted me to massage the relationship. When the board needed quarterly numbers reframed to hide executive missteps, she asked for my language. And I delivered every time. Maybe that's why I didn't notice how tired I'd become. Tired of carrying everything no one else could. Tired of pretending it didn't bother me when Linda took credit in meetings. Tired of believing that hard work eventually pays off if you're patient enough. The thing is, patience only works when the people above you have integrity. I didn't know it yet, but the people above me had something else entirely. They had plans that never included me, no matter how many all-nighters I pulled or how many times I saved them from embarrassment. But right before everything fell apart, I still believed the future was finally turning in my favor. I still believed the promotion was mine. I still believed loyalty meant something until the day it didn't. The morning of the announcement felt strangely calm, the kind of calm that settles over you right before a storm you don't know is coming. I walked into the conference room with my notebook, ready for what I believed was a formality. After all, Linda had told me we were aligning leadership with performance, and I'd been the one carrying performance on my back for years. The room smelled like burnt coffee and the faint scent of industrial cleaner, the kind of mix every logistics office seems to have baked into its walls. People were buzzing, smiling, whispering in that way people do when they think they know what's about to happen. A few gave me encouraging nods. Someone mouthed good luck, and I felt my chest warm with that quiet, hopeful certainty that maybe all the sacrifices were finally about to mean something. Linda stood at the head of the table with her binder, her son Evan positioned beside her like a decorative accessory. He had that polished look, Perfect hair, new blazer, shoes that had definitely never stepped foot inside a warehouse. He flashed an eager grin at the room, and I forced myself not to read into it. Linda cleared her throat and began her practice speech about growth, evolution, and the vision for Redwood's future. I waited for my name. I waited for her to acknowledge years of crisis management, vendor negotiations, regional expansions, and operational overhauls. I waited for her to confirm what she had implied for months, that the director role was mine. Instead, she smiled wider and said, "Please join me in congratulating our new regional operations lead, Evan Grayson." For a second, I genuinely thought she'd misspoken. My brain simply refused to process the words. My hands froze on my notebook. The room erupted into applause. Not enthusiastic applause, more like compliance applause, the type you give because someone with authority expects it. Evan stepped forward as if he'd just won a national award. His grin stretched ear to ear. "Thanks, everyone," he said, giving a little wave like he was accepting a trophy. My pulse thudded in my ears. I felt the heat rise up my neck, but I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there, clapping slowly because anything else would have exposed exactly what I felt. Linda gestured toward me with an open palm. "I want to give special recognition to Tessa," she said. "She's been instrumental in helping Evan understand our operations. A true team player." That line, that rehearsed, sanitized, insincere line, it hit harder than the promotion announcement itself. Helping Evan understand our operations? I had walked him through one basic routing scenario 2 weeks earlier, and he'd spent most of that meeting asking whether our distribution partners had cool logos. He didn't understand even the fundamentals: geography, weather impacts, supplier dependencies, union constraints, nothing. But there he stood, adjusting his blazer like he had earned something sacred. People glanced at me, waiting to see my reaction. I smiled the polite, professional smile women master out of survival. Linda wrapped things up quickly, giving Evan the floor for a short speech about innovation and youthful strategy. He used phrases he didn't understand, tone-deaf corporate jargon about optimizing vertical alignment and modernizing pathways. Words that meant nothing in an industry where timing, relationships, and on-the-ground experience determined everything. When the meeting ended, chairs scraped back and everyone formed a loose line to shake Evan's hand. I stood up slowly, letting the crowd thin. I could feel Linda watching me, waiting to see whether I'd react emotionally, cry, rant, crack under pressure. Instead, I gathered my notebook and moved toward the door with controlled, deliberate steps. Evan intercepted me with a bright, oblivious smile. "Hey, Tessa. I'm gonna need your help getting settled into the role. Mom says you're basically the backbone of the department." Basically, the backbone. The phrase lodged in my chest like a splinter. He didn't mean it as an insult. That almost made it worse. He genuinely didn't understand what had just happened. How deeply unfair, how humiliating, how transparent the power play was. I nodded once, the movement small, tight. "Congratulations," I said. The word tasted metallic, and in that moment, surrounded by the echo of fading applause and the weight of everyone's eyes on my back, something inside me shifted. Not broken, no, something sharper, something that had been too soft for too long, because while they celebrated their victory, none of them seemed to realize what they had actually done. They had just handed the entire operation to someone who didn't know how to run it, and they had pushed away the one person who did. The day after the promotion announcement, the office felt different, as if everyone was pretending not to stare at me while waiting to see whether I'd break. I moved through the halls with the same steady pace I'd always had, answering emails, resolving a warehouse misscan, reworking a supplier routing backup, anything to keep my mind from replaying Linda's smile as she handed my future to her son. By late evening, only a handful of lights were still on. Most people had already gone home, but I stayed behind to finish a vendor reconciliation that Evan had ignored earlier in the day. I didn't want to think about him, or the promotion, or the applause, so I focused on the numbers until the building felt quiet enough to breathe in. I headed toward the break room for water, passing Linda's office on my way. Her door was cracked open just enough for sound to slip through, and normally I would have kept walking, but something about her tone made me pause. It was low, tense, a tone I'd never heard her use in public. "He'll be fine," she was saying. "He has the degree. He just needs time to grow into the role." A man's voice responded, tight with doubt. "Linda, the board is already asking why we bypassed Tessa. She's the one who kept this region from falling apart last winter." My body went still. I didn't mean to listen, but my feet anchored to the carpet before I could think. "Tessa is dependable," Linda said, almost dismissive. "But she's not leadership material. She's good at the grunt work, not the big picture." The words cut clean, sharp. I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself, feeling heat rush into my chest. Grunt work. 7 years of saving her division from collapse, and that's what she called it. "And besides," she continued, "Evan needs this. You know how hard he struggled after the Seattle internship didn't work out. He needs a win." The man sighed. "A win? Linda, this isn't Little League. He's managing a multi-state operation." "He'll learn," she said quickly. "He has to, and Tessa won't fight it. She can't afford to. Not with a mortgage and a teenage daughter. She'll stay in line." The floor felt like it shifted under me. Stay in line. So that was the plan all along, use my competence to prop Evan up, knowing I didn't have the luxury to push back. They'd counted on my silence. They'd counted on my need for stability. They'd counted on me caring too much about keeping my life together to risk losing my job. "If anything goes wrong," Linda added, "she'll handle it. She always does. And Evan will get the credit he needs to move upward. Eventually, she'll settle into supporting him permanently." My breath caught, not loud enough to hear, but loud enough inside me that it felt like something fundamental cracked open. Permanently, that was my future in her mind, a lifetime of doing the work while Evan held the title, a lifetime of being the safety net for a man who didn't know the difference between a routing alert and a supplier escalation. Their conversation drifted into quieter tones, but I'd already heard everything that mattered. They didn't respect me. They didn't value me. They didn't even see me. I was a tool, useful, predictable, and safely invisible. I stepped back from the doorway slowly, careful not to make a sound. Each step down the hall felt heavier, more deliberate, as the truth settled into me like a stone. They believed I wouldn't fight because my life was too complicated, my responsibilities too heavy. They believed I couldn't afford to walk away, but as I reached my desk and shut off my computer, a strange calm flowed through me. Cold, certain, undeniable. They had underestimated the wrong person, and they were about to find out exactly what that mistake would cost them. Walking into the office that Friday morning felt strangely liberating, like I'd already stepped outside the version of myself they thought they controlled. I didn't rush. I didn't hurry to fix whatever fires Evan had surely started. I hung my coat, made coffee, and sat at my desk with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The resignation letter sat open on my screen, every word sharp and steady, the kind of letter you write only when the fog has finally lifted. I printed it, folded it neatly, and placed it in a plain envelope. My hands didn't shake. My breath stayed even. They had expected humiliation to make me desperate. Instead, it made me fearless. Around 4:30 p.m., just as people were packing up for the weekend, I walked toward Linda's office. Evan was in the hallway, fumbling with a pile of reports he clearly didn't understand. He gave me a nervous smile, one that carved an unexpected flicker of pity in me. He wasn't malicious, just unprepared, elevated into a position he had no idea how to carry. Linda stepped out of her office as I approached, her expression already tight with the stress she tried so hard to hide. "Tessa," she said, smoothing her blazer, "do you have a minute?" "I do," I replied, handing her the envelope before she could continue. She blinked, confused. "What's this?" "My 2 weeks' notice." The air around us went still. Evan stopped pretending to organize his papers. Linda tore open the envelope with quick, impatient fingers and scanned the page. A flush rose across her cheeks. "You can't be serious." "I am." She stared at me as if waiting for the punchline, but I stayed silent. Silence unsettled her more than anger would have. "You're leaving because Evan got the promotion?" she asked, voice tightened with something between disbelief and irritation. "I'm leaving because it's time," I said. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Think this through. You're throwing away 7 years of stability. You have a daughter, a mortgage, responsibilities." There it was. The leverage she thought she owned. The reason she believed I would swallow anything she handed me. "I'll manage," I said. Her frustration sharpened. "Walking out now will make you look impulsive, emotional. No company will want someone who abandons their post because they didn't get their way." Her words were meant to sting, but I felt nothing. They no longer had hooks. "That's your opinion." "It's reality," she snapped. Then, as if sensing she'd pushed too hard, she softened her tone. "Look, Tessa, we value you. We really do. But Evan represents the direction Redwood is moving toward. Innovation, new leadership. You still have an important place here." There it was again, the role she'd always intended for me. The reliable workhorse standing behind her son, holding things together while he played leader. "I appreciate the clarity," I said. The slightest tremor flickered in her eyes. She wasn't used to losing ground. "Take the weekend," she insisted. "Come back Monday and we'll forget this happened." It was almost funny, how confidently she assumed I would fold, how certain she was that fear would pull me back into line. "No," I said gently. "This is the right decision." Evan finally spoke. "But okay, Mom. She handles everything. What are we supposed to do if she leaves?" His honesty hit harder than anything Linda had said. She shot him a look meant to shut him up, but the damage was done. She needed me. They both did, and they were only now realizing it. "You'll figure it out," I said. "Just like I will." Linda's expression hardened again. "You're making a mistake, Tessa." "Maybe," I said, "but it's mine to make." I turned and walked away before she could say another word. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Phones rang in distant cubicles, and the building felt different. Lighter, as if it already knew I was no longer bound to it. And for the first time in years, I felt the same. Monday morning carried the kind of tension you can feel before you even step inside the building. The parking lot was fuller than usual, people walking faster, shoulders tight, conversations clipped. I knew before I even reached my desk that something had already gone wrong. Evan's office door was wide open, and he sat hunched over his computer with 3 different spreadsheets pulled up. His face drained of color. He looked like someone trying to read a language he'd never seen before. He startled when he noticed me walking by. "Tessa, thank God, do you have a second?" His voice cracked. I paused, not because I planned to save him, but because I needed to see how deep the damage went. "What's going on?" He swallowed hard and pointed to his screen. "Northern Timber Consortium is threatening to pull their contract? Something about shipment delays and an escalation protocol? I can't figure out what they're talking about." That account alone was worth nearly $4 million a year. I leaned in just enough to read the email. The issue was obvious. So obvious anyone with field experience would have caught it instantly. A supplier in Tacoma had updated their lead times due to equipment failure, and the automated routing adjustment Evan approved on Friday didn't account for the shift. His decision had pushed all deliveries back 3 days. For Northern Timber, 3 days meant a full production halt. "Did you review the routing exceptions before approving the shift?" I asked. His eyes widened. "There were exceptions. The system didn't warn me." "It did," I said quietly. "You just didn't know where to look." Panic rippled across his face like a fast-moving shadow. "Can you just fix it, please?" I wasn't obligated to, not anymore. But the fallout from this would hit every warehouse, every driver, every customer relying on us. And truthfully, I wasn't ready to watch the region I'd spent years building collapse in real time. So I sat beside him and walked through the steps. How to reroute urgent deliveries, how to negotiate temporary supply transfers, Who to call first, how to frame the apology. He took furious notes like a student cramming for an exam. 2 hours later, Northern Timber agreed to stay, barely. By lunchtime, word had already spread. Copper Ridge Metals was complaining about mislabeled manifests. Bend Industrial was threatening penalties because their shipment didn't match the size requirements we'd guaranteed. Every issue pointed back to decisions Evan made without understanding their consequences. Linda stormed into the operations bay around 1 p.m., her lipstick sharp, her eyes sharper. "Tessa," she barked, "into my office." I followed her back, watching the tight set of her shoulders. She shut the door the moment we stepped inside. "Did you tell anyone you're leaving?" "Only you," I said. "Why?" She paced behind her desk, rubbing her temples. "The board has called for a status review on all regional accounts. They're hearing noise about operational failures, and now Northern Timber is demanding explanations." I didn't respond. She wanted a confession, reassurance, something to anchor the chaos swirling around her. "Tessa, be honest with me," she said. "Are you doing something to undermine Evan?" The accusation didn't surprise me. It was easier to blame me than admit she'd placed her son in a job he couldn't perform. "No," I said calmly. "Your son is undermining himself." Her face twitched. "He's overwhelmed. It's his first week." He approved routing changes without reviewing the exceptions. That's not overwhelm, that's inexperience. "Then help him," she snapped. "I'm still here," I reminded her, "but only for another 9 days." Her breath hitched, a small, involuntary sound. "You can't leave now, not when everything is on shaky ground." There it was, the truth she'd been trying to avoid. She needed me, she always had, and losing me now wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. "You'll manage," I said, echoing the same words she'd thrown at me days earlier. For a moment, she looked like she might cry or scream or beg, but she did none of those things. Instead, she dropped into her chair like the weight of the entire region had been placed on her spine. The rest of the week unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. Every morning brought a new crisis. Wrong inventory counts, delayed dispatches, missing confirmations, furious customers demanding answers Evan didn't have. I trained him when the mistakes threatened the stability of the whole operation, but I didn't shield him. I didn't stand between him and the consequences Linda had engineered. By Friday, he looked 10 years older. Linda looked worse. Their perfect plan was collapsing from the inside, and all I had to do was keep doing my job, quietly, professionally, without saving them from themselves. And that's when I realized something unexpected. I didn't need revenge. They were already manufacturing their own. I was 3 weeks into my new job when the first call came from an old warehouse supervisor at Redwood. His voice carried a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction. "Tessa, you should see what's happening over here." I stepped into an empty conference room and closed the door. He didn't even wait before spilling everything. Northern Timber had finally pulled their secondary contract after Evan mishandled another routing chain. Copper Ridge imposed financial penalties so steep that accounting couldn't hide them. Bend Industrial bypassed Evan completely and sent a furious email directly to the board. Within days, 3 more clients hinted they were exploring competitors, including the one I now worked for. Word traveled fast in logistics, faster than trucks on the interstate. People trusted competence, and they remembered who protected them when things went wrong. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile, but a quiet understanding settled in me. Consequences don't vanish just because someone in power ignores them. They wait. They accumulate. They land exactly where they belong. A week later, my new manager slid a business magazine across my desk. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said. The cover headline read, "Redwood Region Collapses Amid Nepotism and Mismanagement." My chest tightened as I skimmed the article. It detailed a cascade of operational failures, customer defections, and internal complaints. It mentioned anonymous employees describing unqualified leadership and a critical loss of institutional knowledge. They didn't name me, but every line made it obvious. Evan had resigned after a challenging period of transition. Challenging was a generous word. Linda had been relieved of her duties following a board-led investigation. The article referenced irregularities in the promotion process and potential ethical breaches. In corporate language, that meant they found everything I overheard behind her half-closed door. Toward the bottom of the article was a line that made me pause. Several former Redwood clients have reached out to Silver Coast Logistics, specifically requesting to work with their new regional director of routing strategy, citing trust and proven expertise. My name wasn't printed, but it didn't need to be. My phone buzzed with 2 new client inquiry emails before I even finished reading. Later that afternoon, during my break, I sat in my car staring out at the rain streaking across the windshield. Part of me expected to feel vindication, triumph, something fiery and explosive. But what I felt instead was something quieter. Relief. Relief that the truth had surfaced without me lifting a finger. Relief that the weight I carried for years had finally rolled back onto the shoulders that created it. A few days later, I ran into a former coworker who told me Linda blamed me for everything. "She says you orchestrated her downfall," he whispered. I shook my head. "No," I said. "She orchestrated her own. I just stopped shielding her from it." And as I walked back to my office, a simple, undeniable truth settled into place. Walking away had done more damage than any confrontation ever could. They built their empire on assumptions. I simply removed myself from being one of them. Months later, during a supply chain conference in Portland, I spotted Evan sitting alone near the back of the hall, a badge from a small startup clipped to his jacket. He looked up when he recognized me, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he offered a quiet, sincere, "I'm sorry." I nodded. There was nothing left to dissect. He'd been placed in a role he wasn't ready for, pushed forward by someone who couldn't see the damage she was doing. I wished him well and meant it. When I stepped outside afterward, the air felt clearer than it had in years. My phone buzzed with another new client request, another door opening because I finally walked away from the ones that kept me small. Revenge hadn't been the point. Growth was, and the life I rebuilt didn't come from fighting them. It came from choosing myself. Looking back, what stays with me isn't the betrayal itself, but the quiet strength I didn't know I had until I finally stopped carrying everyone else's weight. For years, I thought being indispensable would protect me. I thought showing up early, staying late, and keeping the entire operation stitched together would prove my value. But arrogant leadership never sees the people holding the structure in place. They only see the parts they think they can rearrange. Losing that promotion forced me to realize something uncomfortable. I had built an entire life around being needed, but not around being valued. And that difference cost me more than I admitted at the time. It cost me weekends with my daughter, restful nights, a sense of dignity I didn't even know had slowly drained away. Still, the moment I stepped back, everything they assumed I would hold together collapsed, not because I sabotaged them, but because the foundation was always mine. Seeing that unfold taught me a truth I wish I'd learned earlier. Competence is power, but it becomes real only when you stop letting others exploit it. If I were sitting with a friend right now, here's what I'd tell her. Document everything, not out of paranoia, but out of self-respect. Don't confuse loyalty with letting people walk over you. And never believe you're trapped just because someone in authority tells you that you are. Leaving doesn't always burn bridges. Sometimes it simply reveals which ones were never stable. How to get started today. Write down the work you handle that no one else sees. Set one boundary this week and honor it without apology. Notice who respects your limits and who only respects your output. Update your resume even if you don't plan to leave. Ask yourself where your value is recognized, not just used. What part of this story hits closest to home for you?